All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Socciarelli, and this is my Capstone video presentation. So let's get started. Let's a little bit of an introduction. My name is Greg Socciarelli. I am a student at Youngstown State University. I'm a senior, and my major is information technology with a concentration in database. So, also, I'm going to be using these slides here to kind of do some sort of presentation. I think they're going to be on that side. During the presentation, we're going to discuss three different topics. The first topic we're going to discuss is the hybrid SDLC model that we were told to do. The second topic is going to be the social media aspect of a virtual robotics lab that we're trying to implement in the area. And then the third topic is going to be the project management plan of that overall proposal that we're putting together. Based on another solicitation document that we were given, and that kind of organization. So, slide. Like I was saying, the first topic we're going to discuss is the hybrid SDLC model that we were told to put together. It's a 6-page paper in ACM format. A little bit of the background behind this paper is that the first two projects that we were given in Capstone were papers that were either in ACM format or IEEE format. And the whole, idea seen behind the first two papers was to kind of get us understanding the software development lifecycle. That's what we were kind of supposed to apply to the first project, which seemed to be a little bit of a warm-up. And then the second project was a little more in depth with it, because with the second project, what we had to do was discuss two different models and kind of discuss them and then apply them to a different kind of to another solicitation for work, like to apply it to like some sort of project. We had to use at least the spiral model for one, and then we were given the option to choose a different model for the next one. In that situation, I chose the iteration model for that, and it was kind of introducing us into which kind of models to use for work later on down the road. The current instructions for the hybrid SDLC model, we had to devise a 5 to 7 phase SDLC model with 5 to 7 phases. We had to build a hybrid SDLC model between 5 different models: the waterfall, the spiral, the agile, the rapid prototyping, and the object-oriented analysis and design models. The idea behind this was that we were supposed to take all the pros from these models, everything that was kind of good, and then get rid of all the cons, and kind of just try to make sure that you don't have any of the negatives that are associated with either of the models. So that was the idea behind that. Now next I'm going to go over the different the history over each of the 5 models that we were given. So the first model that I'm going to go over is the waterfall model. With the waterfall model, a little bit of the history behind the waterfall model is Winston Royce created it in the 1970s. The model was is more of a simpler kind of model, and after Winston Royce created it, he kind of even started pointing out afterwards some of the flaws that could occur in it. There are 5 different phases of this model: the requirements, the design, the implementation, the verification, and the maintenance. With this model, what I liked about it was that it is kind of brief and it can be applied to smaller models. I guess I kind of liked the phases of them, even though with a lot of these models that we're going to get into, a lot of the phases kind of seem to be the same. So I guess I'll kind of end up saying that I like the phases of each kind of model for the most part. With cons, what I tried to take away from it was that you weren't able to kind of apply it to like a larger project, a more complex project, that it has to be applied to something simple, and it really isn't too good for anything kind of complex. So I tried to not take that from it. The next model we're going to go over is the spiral model. With the spiral model, a man named Barry Boehm created it in the 80s. he created a paper. He wrote a paper called a Spiral Model of Software Development and Enhancement, and he kind of ended up discussing the spiral model in general, like the different kind of cycles it goes through, and like cycles, iterations, however you kind of want to call it, how it kind of keeps going through and hitting the same kind of phases each and every time. With the spiral model, there are 4 phases. There's the I guess kind of the objectives or the requirements, kind of whatever words you kind of want to use for those. Yeah, the first one's the requirements or the objectives. Then the second one are the risks. Afterwards is kind of testing or development, however you kind of want to put that. And then afterwards, then it's kind of planning for the next iteration of the spiral model. What I did like about the spiral model, what I tried to take away from this was that it was always going through the requirements over and over again, and that it was always kind of hitting these same points to make sure that if anything seems to be changing as the project goes on, you're going to hit those points. It's going to happen. So that was always one of the nicer kind of things about the spiral model. What I didn't like from it, one of the problems with the spiral model is that it can kind of go on forever and ever, and there's a good chance you might never see the end if it ends up kind of getting completely out of hand. And it could also cost a lot of money, because like the further it goes on, the more kind of money you have to spend to kind of keep the situation going. So try to take care of that, I guess, or not really include that in my a hybrid SDLC model. The next one I'm going to go over is rapid prototyping. Rapid prototyping is a little bit associated with it seemed to kind of get its start around 3D printing, and kind of that whole situation with like kind of printing out the same kind of printing out different kind of prototype over and over again and stuff like that. With rapid prototyping, you kind of just get a prototype of what you kind of want out there immediately, as quick as you can, and then you go over the actual like things that you would apply to the prototype, like the requirements, the objectives, all that kind of stuff, and then you'll just go and keep releasing new kind of prototypes over and over again. The pros I liked about that was that I did like that you were releasing a prototype, and that you're always kind of updating it to make sure that whatever they're using is the most up-to-date version of that. What I didn't like is that it seems the cons that I tried to remove from it, I guess, rather, I didn't like how kind of careless it seemed. It just seemed kind of weird when, like, you're kind of just releasing this thing, but you're not actually like paying too much attention, it sounds like, initially. So I don't really like that. They weren't really looking over the requirements and everything before they released any version of it, any kind of prototype. So that was definitely something I tried to avoid. The next model we're going to go over is the Agile model. The Agile model became a little bit of background behind the Agile model. As technology kind of changed, they realized that this like waterfall model kind of needed updated, and that it wasn't going to be able to be applied to some of the complexity that ended up kind of occurring with this stuff. So they ended up having to create this new kind of model, the Agile model. John Kern became aware of these kind of problems, that the older model seemed older and dated. So him and a few other people, including Kent Beck, Ward Cunningham, Ari Van Bennekom, and a couple other people as well, ended up helping create the Agile model. With the Agile model, there are different iterations, and it's hitting the same kind of phases over and over again, and it kind of keeps going through, which is really nice. It's a very popular model. There are different phases for each one. The first phase is planning. The next one is analysis. Then comes design, building, and then testing. And then it goes on to the next iteration. So what I liked about that was that I was going through this, like the spiral model, it's going through the same kind of phases over and over again, and like as things change, you can kind of change with it, which I like. Some of the cons that I don't really kind of, I guess, like about this is that it seems like there are at least like 3 different iterations you kind of have to keep going through. I'd prefer if there was some sort of risk to be evaluated within it as well. So I tried to go with that. The final model that we had to go over was object-oriented analysis and design. And with that kind of situation, It's kind of just, with a brief description of it, it's kind of just, from what I understand, the object-oriented analysis part. Like it's kind of that, but then you just apply objects to it in the design phase. So it's kind of just like an object version of object-oriented analysis. I know that kind of sounds a little weird, but from the research I've kind of done so far. Some of the founders of it during the 1980s were a lot of the people who ended up creating UML, Unified Modeling Language, and they were the ones who ended up kind of assembling different parts. Some of these people created the object-oriented analysis part. Some people created the object-oriented design part and put those together and ended up forming object-oriented analysis and design. The object-oriented, like I was saying before, follows some similar kind of path as object-oriented analysis, and then just you kind of just apply the object section to it to make it kind of easier to understand. I did like that they kind of apply an object thing to it to kind of make it easier to understand. However, I don't really kind of I guess just like most of it in general, I don't really like that. Like I like that if they try to do something to make it easier to understand, yet I don't really care for the fact that there has to be like object based. So as for the next slide, I'll begin talking about the actual hybrid model that the hybrid SDLC model created. I will go over, I'll give you a brief overall description of it. It has 6 phases, and there are 6 phases and two different cycles at least. You can apply more cycles as they go on, and there is a point to kind of bail out just in case it starts getting out of hand or you end up running into any unforeseen circumstances. The first cycle, along with the second cycle, they both have the same phases, but to a certain extent, there are different things that are going to kind of be applied within it. With the first cycle, the first phase is the requirements, in which you'll go over any sort of requirements that are given to be applied to whatever kind of product you're releasing, hardware, software, anything like that. You'll go over that. The second phase is risk. With the risk phase, you'll go over any sort of risks that you think you might end up encountering as this cycle goes on, to make sure that you kind of avoid those for the next phase. The planning, which in the planning you would also plan out what you're going to kind of do, along with planning how to avoid the risks to make sure that the product goes smoothly. Product release goes smoothly. The fourth phase is the design, in which you're actually designing what you plan and kind of assembling that and putting it together to make whatever kind of product you're making. With the fourth phase, the fourth and the fifth and sixth phase, well, I guess the fourth and fifth technically, there's, I have it kind of set up with an option where if for some reason you have to bail out as quick as you can, like you just have to end it, whether like you're running out of funding or you just need to get, like, circumstances change and you have to get the product out immediately, the fourth phase allows you to kind of just bail out, and if you want, go to either the next cycle after it's been designed and then released, or you can just bail out and then end the project in general. That way it doesn't have that kind of situation where it's going to go on forever and ever. That kind of bailout situation is also applied to the fifth phase, which is the testing, in which people will go and test the product and see what they like, they don't like, and any sort of things that could be changed or need to be changed, or any sort of risks you might not have seen, can be applied to the next cycle if you end up needing that cycle. The sixth phase is the maintenance phase, in which it's released and then kind of used for the general public, or whoever, I guess, is whoever is going to end up actually using the product, and go through that, and they'll use it, and then whatever kind of feedback you add to the next cycle. The next cycle, same phases. You'll go over the requirements, which the requirements are still the same requirements on top of the ones that might have ended up being added during the testing and maintenance phase. The risk, next phase after that is also risk, in which you'll go over the same kind of risks that you think might end up occurring now that you have a little more experience with what might be happening. Afterwards is the planning phase, and you'll plan ways to avoid those risks, and then in this situation, I guess you can kind of either plan another part of the product, like if it's like part of a bigger kind of whole, or I guess plan a different layout of the current product, and you're just kind of updating that. It all depends on the situation. Phase 4 is the design phase, in which you would design whatever you're coming up with, and then you would go through and if for some reason unforeseen circumstances happen and you have to bail out, you can just go and release the product and then go on from there. The fifth phase is testing, in which you test the product and see how everything goes. If you end up running into any sort of changes that might need to be made that are super significant, in which you'd have to add another cycle, or test it and just see how everything goes. And if it's something minor, you might be able to just fix it right then and there. And then the sixth phase is just maintenance, maintenance of the product once it's been released. And that's really kind of, I guess, the end of that. But at the same time, I mean, it's kind of a continuous thing. You always keep maintenance over a product you've created. So, and that seems to be the end of, that would be the end of the hybrid SDLC model that I've created. If for some reason you did need to add another cycle, then you could. I guess it all depends on the situation. My inspiration for this model was kind of similar to the incremental model, only I added more phases besides with the example that you see here. The incremental model only has 3 of them, and I have at least 6. And I think it's kind of necessary to at least have probably 4 or 5 for any sort of model. That's just my personal opinion. And that is that's the end of at least the hybrid SDLC model. Overall, there's a bailout. Overall, I like that there's kind of a bailout situation just in case something might end up occurring and you need to get out of it in time, like get out of it before something happens. And I like how they're different kind of like how you go over the requirements over and over again, so it's kind of useful in remembering what you're kind of trying to do, like what the end game is. So, excuse me. Before I get into the next 2 parts, I'll give a brief little description of the NRI proposal that these next 2 parts are based on. With the NRI proposal, it went over. They kind of wanted to tackle this situation of increasing communication and interaction between multiple humans and multiple robots and stuff like that. Kind of wanted to make interaction between the two way easier, and the NRI proposal. NRI just ended up discussing that they wanted robots to be advanced over time to the point where they're kind of completing the same kind of simple projects that are like everyday tasks for humans, to kind of end up kind of replacing that and making lives easier for people who need assistance and need help, and make it kind of just make robots, I guess, just more common in everyday life. So that's kind of what they're hoping for. With our NRI proposal, or with the NRI proposal we were putting together, I was assigned to 2 different groups. The first group that I was assigned to, the one group I was assigned to, which is the first topic I'm going to talk about, is the social media aspect of a virtual robotics lab that would be put together if we end up getting, the robots. So, and it was the social media aspect for the Capstone final project. The situation with the social media aspect was that there were team members. The members of the social media group included myself, Jeff, Alyssa, Ryan, Cameron, and Edwin. The requirements, the main requirement for this was to deploy a social media aspect and capability for people who were going to be using the virtual robotics lab. Some of the requirements that they wanted us to hit were the ability for group collaborations, along with being able to post photos and videos and comment on things, on anything that's, I guess, kind of posted for the most part, along with announcements of anything that might be happening. Along with that, they wanted the ability for advertising to kind of increase, to kind of get revenue going, or and have some way to somewhat kind of fund it. And then they also wanted an ability for feedback to kind of have if people have a complaint or question or anything like that, it could be voiced, and people can kind of respond to that immediately. They also kind of wanted this the ability to kind of see the active users on the social media site as well. So with this next slide, I'll discuss the solutions. The solution that we ended up coming up with as a group was to have multiple social media sites, because we feel that one social media site probably couldn't handle everything the way that they wanted it to. Not to mention, it's very common for companies now, and just any sort of business to have multiple social media sites and have different things promoting different stuff, yet at the same time all kind of connected. So we decided to put that together. At least with social media, the three main websites, the three social media sites that were going to be used were Facebook, Reddit, and YouTube. There was going to be a little bit of assistance through the virtual lab website, at least for the Reddit part, and I guess kind of any other websites as well, but more specifically for Reddit, which I'll discuss. And then we came up with a situation for advertising as well to increase to get some sort of advertising in, depending on the situation. And then afterwards, once I'm done talking about all those, I'll just kind of briefly discuss the account recovery for recovering all the accounts that we've created for you guys to use and have access to. The first social media site I'm going to talk about is Facebook. Facebook, we were going to have, it was going to be more of at least the way I was thinking, kind of more of a promotional kind of a page. We were going to create a Facebook page where it's kind of more like, see what we're doing here, more I guess kind of advertising than anything. I didn't feel that Facebook is the appropriate place to kind of I guess collaborate and get like real kind of work done to a certain extent. So it felt like it was more appropriate to for people who were like really going to be using the robotics lab to kind of go into a place where they can have more freedom to kind of discuss things. So the Facebook page was going to be more of a promotional situation, but at the same time, it was going to we were going to have posts that link things to our other sites, like our YouTube page, our website, the Reddit page if you're already a member, which I'll get into that later, and stuff like that. But you are still going to have the ability for promotional purposes to post any sort of photos that might happen, any sort of fun videos that might end up occurring within the virtual robotics lab. And also with Facebook, you can advertise both the page, which would end up costing money, or you can end up using it to, or you try to get like any sort of fun videos you have and get advertising for that once the page starts picking up momentum, and you end up kind of getting people like, on your page and looking at stuff, increasing viewership. With the virtual robotics lab website, there was going to be login information, obviously, for I think the different kind of aspects of that with the data lab, with the database situation and other stuff like that. However, when you were going to create login information for that and an account, I guess ultimately on the website, we were going to have it set up where it's associated with your Reddit, the user's Reddit name as well. That way, only certain select people have actual access to the Reddit group, which I'm going to be discussing here next. But we thought that would be a way to filter out who can and can't use it, because it's going to be private. With Reddit, what we were going to do is create a private Reddit subgroup, and it was going to be very exclusive to pretty much any members of the website, anybody who actually has access to the robotics lab. And you can design Reddit groups like to look really, really nice. You can set it up where there are active users on the side, and you can kind of monitor that. You can have all the profile names there. It can look really, really nice. And we thought with all the kind of stuff that was kind of being asked for, like group collaborations, photos, videos, comments, stuff like that, that'd be more better to have a forum kind of feel to it. That way it's like more collaborative. Because, I mean, the way I'm kind of thinking is that if you're using a virtual robotics lab, you probably know what you're doing in other aspects of life, such as using like a forum and going online. So you probably have different ways you'd kind of like to collaborate as well. So we thought that a forum would be the best, and that Reddit would be a good way to go about doing that, especially since it's a very popular social media site. With Reddit, with the private Reddit subgroup, people would be able to create their own different kind of pages for group collaboration on specific I guess situations they wanted to tackle with the robots. They could post photos of whatever's kind of occurring, any sort of videos, comment on anybody else's other kind of things, depending on if they want them there. And you can also post announcements and kind of have them labeled at the very top. That way people can make sure that they'll actually see the announcement there. And the nice thing about it is that you can get immediate feedback from anything that's really going on, because you can always keep track of the active users and see who's posting what. With YouTube, YouTube would end up kind of being pretty straightforward. You'd post different kind of videos that are going on there, whether they're promotional or being like, this is how we did this and that, kind of trying to get people to kind of talk about it and increase viewership for also to get revenue going. Because the more viewership, the more people would want to advertise on the site. Also, the nice thing about YouTube is that you can have live streaming. So I know that was a kind of feature that also people were interested in. So having a live streaming feature would be the most appropriate. YouTube would probably be the most appropriate way, especially since like everybody's usually watching their videos through YouTube, at least for anything kind of interactive. I mean, unless you wanted to do something promotional, like for like people like, hey, come check this out. That'd probably be maybe Facebook, but at the same time, I think YouTube would probably be better. And you can use other sites to kind of link people to YouTube or link YouTube to other kind of sites in the comments or the description below. Now we're gonna, I guess within the paper, obviously there's no point in me kind of me listing it now, but we are gonna have accounts for everyone to kind of recover. And like they'll be yours to have, like a Gmail account that's linked to, I think, the YouTube account, Facebook, Reddit, like access to all this stuff, and I guess it'll kind of just be yours. So we'll provide you guys with information to actually gather all this information, gather all these other sites, respectively. The final topic I'm going to discuss is the actual project management plan, because I was part of the project management team and that component with Capstone, with the final project for the Capstone course. So I'm going to kind of discuss that a little bit. I guess the overall plan for I guess the project management team, it became a situation where they wanted us to create the actual proposal that would ended up being submitted, which had to be 15 to 20 pages. And it was also, we kind of had to organize everybody else's things because there were 5 different components. I was involved in 2 of them, one being the project management plan. But the project management team pretty much had to organize everybody else's, all the other 4 groups' things and put it into the proposal and like kind of organize it that way. There were multiple members of this group as well. I was in the project management group. Alyssa is in the group. Jeff, Corey, Chris, and Michael. Chris is that one guy who doesn't show up, so he hasn't really done anything, and I think I've only seen him twice, maybe 3 times. But that's a completely different topic. So, the requirements of the project management plan was that we had to organize everybody else's, organize the proposal kind of in a way that seemed both professional and kind of appropriate and like looked good. We had to kind of coordinate with all the teams and kind of make sure that, not really, I guess somewhat kind of manage them, but kind of make sure that like people were progressing, that people were like actually doing work, that we're trying to hit these points and I guess ultimately kind of get stuff done. So kind of trying to organize that and make sure that, things are getting done, I guess. Then we had to apply all of that, all the information into a 15 to 20 page document to be submitted. The first 3 pages of it, at least the first 3 pages of the paper, were going to be a general description and overview of the document and like everything that you're going to end up kind of reading, which when you look into like how like these kind of like proposals and like specification and requirement papers kind of go, that seems to be very common, that you have this whole kind of list of like a background, an overview, who the paper's for, table of contents, if you don't feel like reading all of it, what are the main points to read, like a lot of different kind of things that go into like the general description of the paper before you get into like the actual bulk of the paper, which the big bulk of the paper was supposed to be organized in a work breakdown structure in which you discuss the 4 different topics of the proposal. Obviously, that social media was a part of it because I discussed it previously. And then the other topics were security, in which I make sure everything's, secure within the virtual robotics lab, and both online and physically. Then the database part of it, in which creating databases, tables, and stuff like that to kind of log and keep track of all the information that's being submitted. And also the security would make sure that all that's secure as well. And then also creating the website. You're creating kind of the website, making sure that the website can handle everything that's being used. I think the website they were using WordPress. So, and then the other one was, well, yeah, social media, making sure everybody kind of interact with one another and communicate in an effective manner. So those were all going to be the different parts of the work breakdown structure. Now, we also had to provide a Gantt chart, which would actually kind of keep track of, making sure that, this, once this starts, this next thing will finish. And you could, and for like anybody who's seeing it, can kind of see how the actual layout of time, kind of a timeline of how everything's supposed to go, whether, this can't be finished until the other thing starts, or this can't start until the other thing's finished. So we had to provide a work breakdown, a Gantt chart showing how everything was going to kind of be implemented. We also had to provide a budget of how much all of this is going to end up costing, which would be, the cost of like the actual security, the cost of maintaining a database, the cost of creating a website and updating it and kind of keeping it going, and then the cost of kind of the social media aspect and kind of what, like, I guess, kind of advertising. Well, how much advertising would cost if they decided to advertise. So those were the main requirements that we were supposed to kind of tackle. The organization behind the paper, like I was saying before, a 3-page general description and overview of everything, making sure that it kind of looks like a real kind of paper, like a real proposal that you could submit for something like this, and then making sure that you're kind of hitting all the basic requirements. It's kind of difficult to discuss some of the other kind of things because it's all kind of just organizing everybody else's kind of things, and it's like just kind of talking about a general overview of everybody else's stuff, which, I mean, like, it's weird, like, you're kind of putting you're in charge of a lot, but like not a ton. I don't know, it's kind of hard to kind of put into ways to kind of be like, yeah, this is what we were doing, this is what we were kind of doing. But I mean, yeah, you're kind of just arranging everybody else's kind of things and making sure that it looks legible, like making sure that it's presentable, because they can come up with all the content, but I mean, if it's not presentable or legible or understandable, then it really isn't useful. So that was one of the main things, to kind of just organize all that. As for the budget, little advertising online doesn't really cost I guess too much with like videos and stuff like that, but that was going to be part of the budget, along with any sort of security features that are given within that. That would be the big bulk of the costs, any sort of things to make sure that the lab is secure, make sure that the database is secure, make sure that make sure that pretty much you don't end up having any sort of risk of anything being the cost of the website as well, and how much that would cost to maintain. So I'll just be honest, something else popped up saying that like I think I might ran out of data, so I'm not really sure, but I'm already at 33 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap this up pretty quick since I already have one more slide left. Said something, I don't want to make sure that this video ends up not messing up. We did try to follow the NRI proposal requirements and the budget respectfully, and try to make sure that the Gantt chart is legible, and make sure that you kind of know like what you have to start before the next one can finish, and so on and so forth. Make sure everything organized properly. So that is the actual conclusion of this of my video presentation. Thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for watching this video. If there's any sort of questions you have, feel free to contact me and email me or some sort. I hope you got all the information you needed out of this presentation, and hope you have a Merry Christmas. Have a good day, everyone.